Hello, everyone. Welcome here, and thank you for joining us today for the Tinker-Nave Field Research Panel today in our last lunchtime lecture series. Thank you for being here, listening to the presentation of the students doing field work during the summer. We thank the Tinker Foundation for its support with the students doing pre-dissertation work. So each speaker will have 15 minutes for the presentation, and we will take questions from the audience, both here and in Zoom at the end. Let's begin. Our first presentation is entitled Writing the Wound, Collective Memory as Resistance, Preliminary Research in Lima, Peru. This talk will be given by Sanchez Delgado, a PhD student in Latin American literature here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thanks for having me today. So I'm going to talk about my summer research in Peru. Can you pass to the slide, please?
Yep.
And I think that in order to you to understand my research, I need to talk a little bit about me and my background and where do I came from. And so I did a literature bachelor's degree in Tijuana, where I am from, and the Autonomous University of Baja California. And then I worked as a cultural project manager. I mean, I had several jobs in those years, but then like my first meaningful job was there in the as a cultural project manager in the Office of the Historical and Cultural Memory of Mexico. And there we did like several reading events in very marginalized places, and I organized those. I curated the poetry. I was in touch with every person on ground in every little place we went, and so that experience was incredibly meaningful. So after that, I worked in the Office of the Popular, Indigenous, and Urban Culture at the Ministry of Culture in Mexico as well. And there I went on ground as well, and I worked with several indigenous communities, with several artisans. And then I decided to go back to academia, and last year I completed a master's degree in literature theory and comparative literature in the University of Salamanca in Spain. And so while I was doing my dissertation, which was called like this. I mean, I translated, but yeah, I was writing about like anti-patriarchal narrative strategies in contemporary autobiographical writing in two novels. One was ¿Por qué volvías cada verano? Why did you came back every summer? And Liliana's by Belén López Pepeiro, who is Argentinian. And I also wrote about Liliana's Invisible Summer from Cristina Rivera Garza, who is one of the most famous writers in Mexico right now. And these both books, they talk about violence. They talk about gender violence. They talk about how women are trying to portray their experiences with sexual violence, with feminicide. The first book, it's an autobiographical writing about the fact that the author was raped several times in her teenage years by her aunt. And she's narrating all the process she went through with the law, what she went through with her family. And she uses a lot of archive, and it uses lots of points of view. And then Rivera Garza in this book talks about the feminicide of her sister, who was killed 30 years ago in Mexico, and that is still an unsolved case. And so I was very touched by the impossibility of justice through the law, and I am also a gender violence survivor, so these topics are very into me. So can you? So I also realized that these books are also intertwined with real life, and they are also making political movements in real life, and they are also like touching real lives. So when I was doing that, I realized that I couldn't think of literature just theoretically as I was doing, because I was doing a master's in literary theory. And then I wanted to figure out what literature does, especially like in the context of women writing about trauma, violence, and the body. So then I found out when I was researching about these, I found these theoretical these appropriative writings by Cristina Rivera Garza, and she states lots of things in this theory, but what she says, and that it's useful for this research, is that she's talking about the writing that emerged from collectivity, and she's talking with the Mije culture in Oaxaca, Mexico, and she also is refusing the idea of the solitary and the patriarchal I in the literature, this like manly view of this like unique life that is trying to make his life like a unique experience, and how like and also one of her other points is that writing communities are also sites of survival, and she talks about the writing workshop, and she leads the PhD in creative literature in Spanish and creative literature in Spanish in University of Houston, the only one that exists in this country in Spanish. And it stood up to me that the other novel that I was researching during my master thesis was written in a writing workshop. She was working with Argentinian novelist Gabriela Cabezón Cámara. So I was like, okay, I need to do something with writing workshops, and I cannot. Actually, I'm in a writing workshop right now with Belén López Peiró, but I just remembering that. Can you pass to the other, please? So why autobiographical writings? I am working with these writers right now, and I think that writing the self destabilizes the patriarchal and colonial structures that try to like mold the way we are supposed to act and the way we are supposed to talk and the topics we are supposed to write about. And I think that writing about violence, which has been historically like a very silenced topic, it's also exposing the violence, and it threatens the systems of violence of the state, of the laws. And I also deeply think that the personal is not less literary. And so I also work with letters, lists, notes, with personal texts, because I think they are like profoundly political, and we have been told that they are just like women's writing in a pejorative way. So can you pass, please? So I came up with this idea, which was writing an autobiographical writing workshop. I'm gonna show you later this again. So I was writing about how, can you pass? I wrote it in English then. So what I was trying to find out what in this workshop, and of course I didn't find out. It's because this is basically my dissertation question. Like, what does it mean to write in first person? What are we trying to say when they do it? What are they trying to point out? And why is it important to tell what it hurts, and how is it political, and how also like care and how also feelings are also profoundly political. And the other question was, how does writing allow us to reclaim the narrative of our own stories? So if we don't have justice within the law system, how can we reach that justice? Is it possible? Is it not? Are we doing something to achieve it? Are we doing So why Peru? So Gabriela Wiener, who is one of my main inspirations and my favorite writer, but like I research on her as well. She's an autobiographical writer. She's awesome. You should read her. She's an activist as well. She writes about herself. She writes about anti-racism. She about anti-colonialism. And so I wanted to go where she is. I wanted to know where she is and about the place. I wanted to know the place she's writing about. And also, so Peru has a 53.4% of women who have reported experiencing some form of base gender violence. So I thought it was like important to go there and talk about this. And also, it's a country like profoundly unequal. And I mean, we can question what poverty is, but according to World Bank, 7 out of 10 Peruvians live in poverty, and 1/4 of the population are identified as indigenous, and they are a bit relegated in society. We can say that. And can you? So what happened in Lima? The picture is not there.
No, it didn't show up.
Well,
There's one here. Is that,
yeah.
about 5 minutes?
I have 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5
Okay.
minutes left.
So I found out this amazing place called Placeres Compulsivos, Compulsive Pleasures. It's an independent feminist and queer bookstore in Barranco. And they sell exclusively books written by women. And they host workshops and events. They also, it's very interesting because they have a book exchange shelf. So if you want to buy a book and they have it in the book exchange shelf, they tell you not to buy it because you can just exchange it. So it's like I spent many hours there talking with everyone there, with the owner, and she's struggling a lot financially, but she's putting her money into that project, so she's awesome, Veronica. And so can you pass to the other? Thank you. So I came with this workshop without knowing anyone in Peru, and we had like an overwhelming response. We thought that no one was going to sign up, and we got around like 40 emails in one day. And more people showed up the day of the event. The space was very little, so we only host and they have like their national independence during that time, so it was challenging to find. And so I did it all in one day, which was like very challenging as well. Can you pass? So it was free, and I think this response of it was very meaningful because it showed up the urgency of the topic, and it showed how deeply like autobiographical writings resonates with women and queer people, and it showed that free, accessible workshop can create community across age, class, and identity. And they really point out the fact that it was free. Can you pass the other one? So as I said, these lasted 6 hours. It was intended to be in 2 or 3 sessions, but it ended up being super intense Saturday. And participants shared their experience of violence, identity, and desire. Some were writing for the first time. Some of them were more experienced. So it was like very plural. Can you pass, please? And those are us writing in the bookshop. And can you? Yeah. Okay. So I'm getting to the final of this. So what happened next? So they made like a huge, like a little community. People made friends. Like they're still in touch now. I can see them through their stories on Instagram. They form a small writing group as well, and they're getting together to write. And we're still in touch. So I think like writing, like as Rivera Garza say, as collective generates horizontal communities. Can you go to the other one, please? So while I was in Lima, I also was mapping independent spaces, not just placeres compulsivos, but also Espacio Secundario, La Rebelde, and La Poesía Salva. La Poesía Salva, it's an open mic who hosts especially queer communities. I conducted interviews, conversations, and met new authors, and especially independents that can be found here or in Mexico. Gabriela Wiener was there by chance because she resides in Madrid, but she was there. So I was with her, And I met her. She was very kind with me. I saw her reading poetry and presenting her book, so that was really meaningful as well to see like the community that gathers around her. And also the Lima International Book Fair was happening at the time, so I went there lots of times. So and Gabriela Wiener was there as well. I went to a conference. I attended an international conference as well, talking about these same topics of violence. And well, this is Gabriela Wiener reading her poems, and what I learned. Can you?
Yeah.
Well, that writing together is create community and memory, and how they and that autobiographical writings resonates deeply across identities, and that it's really important that to have these independent spaces that hold like secure emotional infrastructures that can hold those, because during the workshop we cried, we laughed, we did everything of that, and it was like a really secure space. And I'm thinking about the importance of open mics and book clubs as well. So my next steps in this research, I'm going to offer an online workshop with the people who weren't able to attend that day, because I'm also going to integrate these findings into my dissertation that I am presenting next in a year. And I want to replicate these workshops in Mexico. And I also want to work with the Madison community, with the Latino Madison community. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Anene. Okay.
Thank you, Anel. So we will have now our second presentation titled Between Bench Work and Debate, a report on preservation research in Salvador, Brazil. Our speaker will be Logan Krishka, a PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology. Welcome and thanks.
There we go.
Thanks everyone for being here, to Lassies, especially for providing me the means to do this research, and then also allowing me to share a little bit about it today. So I'm going to start briefly with some context. I am a fourth-year student in the Department of Anthropology. I spent June and July this summer in the city of Salvador on Brazil's northeastern coast in the state of Bahia. It is Brazil's first capital, and it's also the site of the country's earliest oil production. So in this sense, Salvador embodies the sort of historical entanglements of resource extraction, scientific innovation, and local traditional ecological knowledge that are central to the conceptualization and the further development of this project. So my main goal this summer was to gain entree with two groups of people that I'll continue to work with when I go back for a year-long stint of research. My project broadly proposes to combine a laboratory-style ethnography with an ethnography of a artisanal Quilombo coastal fishing community. These groups who are negatively affected by environmental changes, specifically in this case, an oil spill in 2019, which was the country's and I believe the continent's largest oil spill. Quilombos are communities including indigenous people and descendants of fugitives of enslavement. They are historically marginalized and therefore very politically active, most often fighting against structural and environmental racism. So the two groups of actors that I spent time with this summer were bioremediation scientists at a local university, that's the picture on the left, and some fishing communities on and around an island that is part of the city of Salvador. Bioremediation, briefly, is a strategy that uses microbes, fungi, algae, plants, and other biotic material to clean up areas that are polluted with oil and heavy metals, other sorts of toxic materials. And many of these toxic elements have hampered the lives and livelihoods of traditional fishing communities and shellfish gathering communities in and around Salvador. And these communities rely heavily on healthily functioning mangrove ecosystems, and a lot of the bioremediation work also focuses on mangroves. So I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. So here are some of the major industrial polluters in Salvador. The Aslan refinery was formerly owned, it's the one on the top left, by Petrobras, the state oil company, until 2021. The port of Aratu arrived in the 1970s. A Dow chemical plant is also about 50 years old, arriving in the 60s, 70s. And there's also a soy exportation port that was started in 2005. Now, I was told that it was originally supposed to be a cookie manufacturing company, but somehow they actually wanted a soy exportation and production port, and were able, under the same environmental licensing, to create that without having to redo anything. Dow Chemical and this soy port have a really unique, unpleasant smell, and they're different smells when you're close to them. And when you're nearby on a boat, for example, like I was on a toxic tour one day, you are actually able to see like the rainbow slick in the water on top. And there's also a concrete factory nearby, but that's out of the frame of this, and a naval base too. Okay, so before I get into what I did this summer, I'm just going to very briefly hopefully go over some of the research questions that motivate my project. So the first question here is, what practices, tacit knowledges, and understandings underlie bioremediation science, and how do these actors' goals impact local communities? And actors here refers to scientists, lab technicians, students, and bioremediation supporting industries like the state and Petrobras. One thing that I did was observe preliminary exams and a dissertation defense, during which I was able to pick up a little bit on how scientists think of their own work. So for example, one defense was on biofixation of carbon by microalgae, and a faculty member called for more socioeconomic factors and justification for the lab work. Another person on the committee framed the work as a discussion about the future of Brazil, which I thought was really interesting. In another defense on bioaccumulation of hydrocarbons in bivalves and mangroves, there was a specific link to this 2019 oil spill that is also really important for the local fishing communities. There was also a dissertation defense on an environmental monitoring humanoid robot, and this was framed as a way of bringing the lab to the field versus the other way around, which is the more classic way that this sort of science is done. There is no specific remediation work on some of these islands, but there is a lot of collaboration between the university and communities that are negatively affected in terms of health studies.
Oops.
The second research question
sorry.
is, no, you can go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
How is the nation state remade through scientific practice and subsistence activities like fishing? So on the left here is a mural that is in the Institute of Geosciences, and it was the first thing that caught my eye because it's ginormous when I walked into the building. The center that you can hopefully see is a rare bluish stone that one professor emphasized to me is only found in Brazil and Africa due to the geological formations. This isn't really, it might not be that significant, but the context is that this happened only 5 minutes after she was also describing to me how when they were naming that robot that I was just talking about, they decided to go with Frank because they didn't, quote, want it to be man's slave, and they're citing the Germanic origin of the name's meaning of free. So this research question rests a little bit more on the historical conjuncture of Brazil's violent racial history and present, and the discursive connections that actors make to it. On the right is the Aratu port. And when we were close to it on the toxic tour, one of the island leaders said that, quote, if it were up to me, besides suing the companies, I'd sue the state itself. Brazil is the state that most kills Black people. In other words, it's a necropolitical state that functions in part at the expense of Black lives. Okay. The third question is, what might a comparison between scientists and Quilombo fishers reveal about navigating through the Anthropocene with non-human others? So this brings us back to the robot. I was initially interested in algae and fungi used in bioremediation, and I do now know that they are genetically modified to be better at their chosen tasks. And this is one aspect of an ethnography beyond the human, but this humanoid robot designed for remote environmental monitoring is something that I wasn't expecting. So Arthur stands for Advanced Research and Technology for Humanoid Robots. Frank, like I said before, has this historical significance of the freeness of it. And then STEAM, the classic science, technology, engineering, art, math. And I bring this up because it's one example of how fieldwork is full of surprises, and I was never expecting a humanoid robot to enter into the picture. On the right is one community leader from one of the fishing communities. In my first meeting with her, she and her team were discussing a public-facing book that they want to write of some sort. And there was a professor from a university in this meeting who was asking for some sort of philosophy from her. And she wanted to explain that she identifies with the female CD of the mangrove. The CD is a small indigenous type of crab that's really important economically. And she went on to say that she doesn't prescribe to just one type of politics or philosophy or feminism. She's broad, like the female CD who goes to the mangrove, gets married, and then goes back to the world. She's like that. I don't stay in one place. I don't subscribe to one specific movement. I identify myself with this female CD. So that's a sort of philosophy beyond the human that I picked up on. All right. So what I did, I've alluded to a lot of this already, but I went to a roundtable on environmental rights and justice, observed some exams and defenses. I toured a university lab and gained access to the department archives. I also completed a safety training for lab entrance. And I met with a local politician who is a Colombo fisher a couple times. Actually, it was in this first meeting that I was reaffirmed the idea or the importance of mangroves for this project. And then on that note, with her and her team, I participated in a cleanup in the last remaining mangrove in mainland Salvador. Most of them are around the actual city limits. This was a group with a group of environmentalists who live right there. It is right, that blue building behind is a huge development project that's encroaching on the last remaining mangrove in the mainland Salvador. Okay, and one of the most important things that I did was visit some of these fishing communities around the bay. One time in what was this toxic tour that I talked about briefly earlier. And since it was winter there, it was tricky to travel by boat a lot of the time, just due to the weather and the frequent wind and rain. You can either get someone to captain you on one of the small canoes like on the left or on one of the bigger boats on the right. So on the day that I was in that toxic tour, I took the larger boat. Along with about a dozen others, including local community leaders around the bay. That is the port, and that is, you can barely see, but there's a like a gas release plume. And all this is within, if you remember back to that first picture, like within 3 kilometers of a lot of these communities. The leaders explained to me the details about all these polluters and how they've affected the lives of fishers and seafood gatherers, and specifically how Dow Chemical itself serves as a black box, since it doesn't, it's basically impossible to get any information about what they produce, how much, where it's going, what is happening at all, and when stuff is getting dumped into the bay.
About 5 minutes.
Okay. And at one point, we anchored, and one of the leaders spoke about all these issues for about 45 minutes, which was really powerful and super interesting. This picture shows the destruction. It's kind of hard, it's hard to see, but it shows the destruction of mangroves by Dow. On the left, you can sort of see the land is a lot more barren than it is on the right. And all these mangroves existed within living memory, and now they're gone. Just not gone, but severely reduced. Okay. And then when we arrived in one of the fishing communities, we were shown actual abandoned oil wells that are like right in the center of the community itself. And it was only about 10 years ago that Petrobras put up fencing around it to keep it out because it was super dangerous, not only in general, but especially for young kids running
Yeah.
around. Okay. And this is another one that's kind of tricky to see, but what's plainly obvious, I noticed seeing this all over, is the economic and subsistence importance of shellfish, because these are thousands of oyster and crab shells just discarded along the shores. Okay, so everything that I talked about is very preliminary by nature, as is most research in the early stages. But the most important thing that I did this summer was having crafted the social ties that I'll need to continue this research next year, and having gathered just enough preliminary evidence to sort of support the feasibility of the project in the future. So thank you again. Thanks to
Thank
classes
you.
and everyone that's here in person and virtually.
Thank you.
More questions?
I have a question for Logan. You used lab ethnography. Can you talk a little bit about that? I was just curious what I know what an ethnography is, but an ethnography.
A lot of it is
Like, what's that?
starting in like the 70s, 80s. Probably one of the most influential was Latour did
Okay.
Laboratory Life.
Oh, okay.
So that is, I don't think it would be completely fair to say that that inspired a generation of people to do anthropology in laboratory settings, but it certainly was a form of inspiration. And then since then, that sort of melding of the ethnographic qualitative approach to something very technical and scientific is kind of
Got it.
So there have been plenty of people that have done ethnographies in physics labs, in biochemistry labs, in chemistry specific labs, any sort of like traditionally STEM field that you would think of. There's even been ethnographies of like math. And a lot of this is more STS inspired, but it's a good meld of like anthropological methods in STS. So that's what I was sort of hinting at.
Got it.
Is that sort of
That makes
thread,
sense.
that academic thread that started in 70s.
I figured that's what I just wanted to clarify. Like,
Yeah.
does that? Yeah, that was awesome. That's cool.
Questions? I'd like to ask to the three panelists, like, what was the most rewarding experience or thing of doing research in Latin America? The person that comes.
Yeah, I would agree with the food. I really like shellfish in Salvador is a very
Oh,
sneaky
so
heavy,
good.
city, but again, learning how to adapt to like very, very last minute things. And having 14-hour days and then getting on a flight in 2 hours later. So, yeah.
So for me, besides the food, which in Peru is amazing. So the fact that I really felt that I gave something back to the community and that they were like really happy with what we did. So that for me was the most rewarding thing. And that they're still like writing to me like, hey, do you have a book recommendation? Hey, do you like, so that like community that was formed, I think it's very important.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you, and I mean, it's so funny because we were like, she was the other night, so I was in Lima at the book fair. So, and yeah, I know the bookstore, so yeah, I know. I don't have like a strong connection to them necessarily, but yeah, I've been there and purchased it there. But I was sort of curious, so you're planning on doing some of this work in Mexico and then here in Madison again too, and sort of, I guess, do you have any sense or like, are you expecting to have like a vastly different kind of experience? Like, and I don't know, being Mexican yourself, like, did that have any influence maybe on how that workshop went? Will that be different for you if you have a workshop in Mexico? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of like, do you anticipate there being any kind of something radically different and how like the women respond to this sort of
Yeah, I mean, it's easier for me. It was easier for me to do something there because like I don't have like the like embarrassment of being in a place like, like no one know me there. So it's like, it's easier to like just go there and explore, yeah. So that would be like a bit more challenging, like in Mexico, but I really like, I wanna do it like, first of all, in the sites where I am, in the places where these writers that I am researching are from. So probably like in Argentina, but I don't know if I am gonna end up like including all those sites. So, but I'm sure that I want to include like a chapter about these. So that's why I was thinking like working with the Madison community here in, so I want to have like a broad experience. So I don't want to like stick to just like bookstores or to those places. So I think like here will be very different. I will need to adapt my materials and everything. But I would like to work with also with migrants in Tijuana border because I'm from there. So and Mexico City, I think like the thing with, I lived so many years in Mexico City, but the thing there, it's like there's so many things happening there. So I think it's like, I don't know if they need one more workshop. I can maybe go to other places to the whole metropolitan area, but yeah, I do plan to replicate these.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had like any thoughts about how to replicate this workshop without you being present. Like if this workshop can be like implemented by people without your presence, so it could be replicated in more places.
Yeah, so when I proposed this project, I was like, I read this little book by it was called Gente y Cuentos, and it was in Argentina, and the people were from Argentina, but they're like, they did like a horizontal model of and like the question was like who's really owning the literature. So yeah, that's my plan. That would be like awesome actually to like create like that's like my goal, to create a method that can be replicated in different spaces. And not, and as I said, not just in a library, but in a community center or with different communities, because like the texts we read there were very difficult to read. So maybe like adapt those and yeah, I think that would be nice as a chapter in my dissertation. Yes. Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here for this panel, and you are invited to our second Tinker-Nave panel next Tuesday. Thank you.